Hi, Jenny. It's amazing to have you with us. I'm thrilled to be interviewing you today.
Hey, Jorge, I am glad to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
For all of you watching this interview, so Jenny is not only Zapier CFO, which is probably one of the most inspiring stories in the tech scene these days, but also she was Mailchimp CFO and a founder herself. And now also looking forward for her next step in her career as she is retiring from Zapier and will act as an advisor. Well, really quick, Zapier, for maybe it's all known, but Zapier makes automation incredibly easy and accessible to everyone. Even I am using Zapier at a personal level, having seen my Trello with Gmail and my calendar. And Mailchimp is the leading all-in-one marketing commerce platform for entrepreneurs and had been acquired by Intuit for 12 billion. So thanks again, Jenny. Jumping into those questions. So you have over 11 years of CFO experience at two well-known hypergrowth SaaS companies. What's your secret when it comes to taking on finance teams, developing and growing it, and then trying to make it as a well-functioning as it can be?
I don't know that there's a secret, but at both Zapier and Mailchimp, I was the first finance person, so I built the function and the teams from the ground up. So I think, one of the most important things is to hire great people. You're only as great as you're only as good as your team. So, you have to hire the right people. I've made, a lot of mistakes in my career in doing that where, I rushed hiring and I hired before I found the right person and it really hurts. So you need to make hiring a priority and spend the time finding the right person. And then you have to be really clear as to what the skills are and personality that you're looking for. So what would make that person successful in that role. So I don't necessarily look for experience. I look more for attitude. So in a fast growing startup, you need someone that's has grit, thrives in a fast paced environment and is always looking to learn. So, that's not always what somebody coming from a more corporate or more mature company is used to that. So I've seen great finance people that are hugely successful in a mature company, but they really struggle and are not very successful in a startup. So it's really important that you know your culture and know what makes someone successful so that you hire the right people. And then I think another thing that I've learned is I always try to make processes and procedures as simple as possible, especially when you're smaller. So when you're a fast growing company, your processes can change every 6 to 9 months. So you have to be continually looking to see what you're doing and what can be approved and what can be changed. And it's also about, when you're small or when you're slowly growing, it's you kind of know what's going on. So it's I try to keep things as simple as possible. So you don't really need a bunch of checks and balances or approval processes. So I give people credit cards. I tell them here's how to use it. And then I trust them that they'll use it the right way. If you see someone that's had, a $200 steak dinner, you just you message them on Slack. It's hey, I hope you enjoyed it, but let's not do that again. So, I think it's important then as you grow, you can put the controls in place, but I don't think they're needed, early on. And then I think the last thing I'd say is I've learned that I think it's really important to instill in the culture a value mindset. So I call it to stay scrappy. So scrappy to me is finding creative ways to get the same quality and experience, but at a lower cost. So for example, a few years ago, we were pretty small and didn't have a lot of money. And one of our founders wanted some cool hoodies and they were over budget. So one of my team members, they started searching on the internet, trying to figure out what to do. And they found this coupon where we saved over $2,000. So we all got cool hoodies. So I think it's all about spending money wisely throughout the company. So we try to instill that in the culture. So when someone's hired, they go through an onboarding program and we actually have a class that's called Spending Money Wisely. And then we do financial updates once a month in our all hands meeting. And as part of that, we include a part that's called smart savers and smart spenders. And we give shout outs to people on money they've saved or money that they've spent wisely. And, people will clap or give high fives in the Zoom chat. So, it's affirmation that, this is what we like to do in our culture.
Amazing. those are really cool. Thanks a lot. And so I would say also taking notes, because those values and that way I think that well, for us are incredibly useful at our stage at Abacum, for sure. And one sentence that is stuck with me, a really good friend of mine told me a while ago, and it says, when you are hiring, if there is doubt, there is no doubt, right? And I try to keep it really close to me, because it's true what you were mentioning earlier. Hiring the right people, it's key at this stage. And the processes and procedures also, well, amazing. So thanks for that, because a lot of things for us are extremely useful at our stage. And Zapier is 100% remote work company,
Yes.
which is becoming more common these days. But how do you manage your finance team with that type of setup?
Yeah, so Zapier is a remote first company. We've actually been remote from the very beginning. So we've been doing 10 years as a remote company. So it's kind of part of our DNA. So, Zapier is my first remote role. So it was a big change for me at first, but I think what I've learned is it's kind of like remote is like in person times 10. It's like you have to like exaggerate everything. So what I mean is, like, when you communicate, you have to communicate like multiple times and in multiple ways. So you tell someone on Zoom, you post it in a Slack channel, you DM somebody in Slack, and then sometimes like we even put like multiple posts on our intranet for things for the company or our teams to see. So it's like you have to like really make sure everybody understands the information and knows what needs to be done. And then like for Zapier, like besides being remote, we're also really widely distributed. So we're across 20 time zones. So we have to really be intentional about everything we do, because a lot of times people are sleeping while others are working. So we try to keep everything, as much as possible in writing. So like weekly, I make sure that like everyone on my team knows their priorities for the week. And then whenever we have meetings, we make sure that we write everything down. We write all our notes down, and everyone, when they leave the meeting, they know exactly what needs to be done. We keep all our notes in Coda or Google Docs, so like people can refer back to them if they forget something, or like I said, if they're on the other side of the world and there's no one awake at the time, there's places where they can go to get information, so they don't have to wait till the next day to get an answer. And
that's crazy. That because not only you are remote, but you are really dispersed around the globe.
Right.
So I imagine that it's extremely hard to set up a meeting, even a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, well, what we try to do is we try to like switch times, where like sometimes somebody will have to come early and then someone will have to come late. So I'm on the East Coast of the US. So it's actually I'm kind of in between, because like APAC comes on late in the day for me and Europe's on in the morning. So a lot of times like for our all hands for our whole company, we switch off every week. So one's at noon New York time and one's at 4 New York time. So it's like the noon one gets all the US and then Europe and most of Europe, and then the other one gets the rest of the world. So it's like everybody always has a chance to come to an all hands, and we record them so people can watch them later. But one more thing I wanted to say about the remote work, I think COVID's really hurt us in this way, because part of, I think, being remote is you have to make the connection in person first, and then you can go back and work asynchronously. But, with COVID, we haven't been able to do that. So previously we would get together as a whole company for 1 week, twice a year, and then each team would get together for a year. So you're able to build those relationships and connections in person, and then you're able to work together. But now, since COVID, we haven't been able to get together for almost 2 years, and I feel like you can tell that it's really hurt our culture, and we have more people issues because over half the company, people haven't met. So it's been difficult.
For us, well, we were born during COVID, and we do have organized quarterly offsites or get together. But there was a lot of people asking me, why are you doing that? And it was because exactly what you were mentioning. You have to make the connection and then go remote. If not, it's hard to bond. and it's difficult to collaborate and engage daily.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's great. So you mentioned that your plan is to keep on doing that twice a year once things go back to normal, right?
Right. Yeah, we have one
Amazing.
planned in May, so we're hoping that we can do that.
Fingers crossed. I hope so. And we know, in terms of strategic finance and getting your forecast right, what is unique or different from a B2B SaaS companies compared to other more traditional B2Bs or B2Cs organizations?
Yeah, so both Zapier and Mailchimp, they are B2B companies, but we are product led. So our go-to-market's more like a B2C company. We don't have a sales team or anything. So instead of having, a sales funnel to predict revenue, we have, monthly and recurring subscriptions. So it's actually fairly easy to predict. And then all of our revenue comes in through credit cards. So we get cash in a couple of days. So our cash is fairly easy to predict. So those pieces are probably a lot easier than a traditional B2B company or B2C company. But what's harder for us is knowing the customer behavior and why a customer does something. So we have like millions of users and a ton of data. So it's hard to figure out why someone converts to paid or upgrades to a higher price plan or churns. It's like we don't have a salesperson for someone to reach out to the customer to find out, what's going on. It's like a lot of times we don't even know who the customer is. We just have an email address. So and a lot of times it could be a Gmail address. So it's like we don't even know who the customer is. So that part's, really hard. So like recently we connected Zendesk to our user data so that we could look to see, if a user churned or did something, like we could see if they contacted to support and like what happened after that. So yeah, so the customer behavior is a challenge. And I think probably one of our biggest challenges right now is like forecasting new initiatives. So, forecast is only as good as the inputs and the people doing it. So you can have a great forecast, but if the information put into it is is not good, then it's worthless. It's like, junk in, junk out kind of thing. So, I think the finance team, has the responsibility to talk to leaders and managers and make sure they have all the correct inputs and data. But the problem for us right now is those, the inputs and data are not great. So our FP&A team is fairly new, and we have a lot of new stakeholders. So these new stakeholders don't always know what information is important and what's valuable for the finance team. So, our FP&A team, like they need to really learn a lot more about the business, and so they can ask the right questions and get better information. And yeah, we're really trying to grow that muscle right now.
Amazing. I think that we are on this journey of trying to help finance team become business partners. They being able to translate business decisions into financial impact and explaining that to the organization so everyone is aware of what is needed. How have you seen that change? Because from earlier at Mailchimp now to Zapier, is there anything that comes? I was thinking, as you were describing, the amount of data probably that you are managing, which is probably crazy at both companies. Mm-hmm. How that has changed or transitioned from one to another?
Yeah, I think the volume of data and the amount of data you're able to get there's a lot more, and it's much faster. You're able to get, it's more real-time data versus waiting. And also I think there's a lot more tools out there that help you segment the data or put it together in a more readable or understandable fashion.
Yes, I mean, makes a lot of sense. And the headcount of finance teams in SaaS companies usually don't scale at the same pace as other departments. How have you coped and adapted to maintaining strategic relevance?
I've worked a lot more than I needed to. Yeah, I mean, that is true. But I mean, honestly, me or the CFO is usually the owner of the budget process. So, you need to make sure that the headcount, in the budget has the headcount that you need, and you need to advocate for your team if you're not getting what you need. Finance to me should be revenue generating and not a cost center. So if if it's done right, then you should be able to find ways to increase revenue and profits. And if you do this, then, asking for more headcount shouldn't be a challenge. So it's all about, I think, showing your value and your worth.
You're totally right. Probably that question has implied that, that what usually follows finance teams more as a cost function, not as a revenue generating, which is what we all thrive for, becoming that revenue generating engine. Zapier's core value proposition is in the automation of workflows. Have you seen automation as a key value driver for your finance team?
Yeah, I'm actually need to be better than what I am. I don't use Zapier as much as I should, but my accounting team has done like an amazing job and have done like a huge amount of automating some of the manual tasks. And they've probably saved at least a couple people in heads just because of all the automations they've done. So like they've done like examples, like they've automated a lot of the approval processes. So like if somebody wants to go to a conference, there's a Airtable form that they can just click on, and it gets sent to their manager, and then their manager can approve or not. And then they get an automatic Slack message back to them if it's approved, and it shows how to set up the travel. And then there's also all the messages go to accounting. So something like that before was all automated, and they had to go back to or was all manual, and they'd have to go back to the manager. Did you approve this? What do you think? So there was a lot of time that was done before. And so yeah, Airtable's like, we use it also for like, we have like individual budgets for like office setup budget and software and some training. And so like now it's all of that is in Airtable, and it automatically, so whenever an expense comes through, it goes to Airtable, and then Airtable calculates how much somebody has in their budget, and then they're automatically sent like a Slack message once they're at 80% of their budget, so they know where they're at, and then it's also sent to accounting.
Cool, pretty cool. I have to explore that. Although my friends at TravelPerk might not be as happy on the automation side for the travel expense, but that's definitely a pretty cool hack. What are the main differences between finance tasks and responsibilities at early stage companies versus growth stage companies? And what are the key things to have in mind while growing?
I think a lot of the stuff is the same. It's just a different level maybe. So like, early stage is like you're setting up all the processes and procedures because there's nothing there. You need to know your numbers. Early on, you need to keep an eye on cash and be cost conscious, but you also need to invest in the business. So I think, having accurate and timely forecasts is always important, but I think it's really important when you're at the early stage. I've worked with numerous startups that aren't investing enough in the business because they don't think they can afford to. It's like, and then once they see like an income statement and cash flow forecast, it opens up the door for them to start spending and investing in the business. When I first started at Zapier, they were not hiring as fast as they should since they were trying to preserve capital. And I showed them a revenue forecast and cash flow forecast and said, okay, we can drive more revenue if you hire some more customer support people, because we found out that if there's a certain amount of time that a support ticket is answered in, then there's a better chance of somebody upgrading. So it's like, well, we need to hire some more support people. And once they saw the numbers, then they started hiring immediately. So I definitely think that it's important that you're really watching your numbers. And then, as I said earlier, it's like keeping things as simple as possible. I think you need to do that as long as you can until you actually have to put in formal processes. Because that's what, then like going to the growth stage, that's what you have to do. You have to start putting in the formal processes. And I think one thing that's really important is making sure that your systems scale for the next few years. So like recently we moved from QuickBooks to NetSuite. We moved our forecasting off Google Sheets, and then we put in a formal, PO process. So it's getting all the right, everything in place so that you can grow and have all the systems there. As I said, we're just starting to build out our FP&A team. So I think it's, building out the FP&A team and really trying to drive revenue so you can continue growing. And then I said, I think you still need to be cost conscious and, really need to watch your costs. And then I guess, things to keep in mind. It's like what works today doesn't work tomorrow when you're growing fast. So you have to always make sure you're looking ahead and planning ahead. As I said, hiring is super important, and especially now because it's, hiring is not as easy as it used to. So it's like hire before you meet the person. And then I've seen like, once you start having more money, it's like there's a tendency to spend it foolishly sometimes. So it's like keep an eye on your expenses and make sure cash is being put to its best use.
Amazing. So Jenny, I think there's a lot of wisdom in those words. We should probably, most of us, print those and have them present. But it's a really good food for thought regarding hiring is being more tough these days.
Yeah.
And even if I think humbly that I would be competing for the same type of talent as Zapier at some point, if now companies operate at a global level. So that makes it even more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we used to feel like one of our advantages was being remote, but now it's not anymore because there's a lot of companies that offer remote. So it's like, okay, we don't have that advantage anymore.
Good. So, well, thanks a lot, Jenny. It was amazing. It was really, really interesting and really insightful conversation. And I cannot thank you enough for taking the time with us and sharing your knowledge, and wish you the best on your next step.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.